Hello, my name is Eddie Gutierrez. I'm an evangelist, and I am here on Magnify the Lord channel with Sister Lily, and I'm here to share my testimony, Rescue from the Grave. I recently, well actually 4 years ago, had a liver transplant. I was diagnosed with liver cancer, cirrhosis of the liver, pulmonary hypertension, chronic kidney failure, and Hep C. I grew up in San Francisco, but I was born in Central America, Nicaragua. And before I came to the United States, when I was born in Nicaragua, I was in the hospital because I was sick shortly after I was born. And while I was in my crib in the hospital, a nurse walked by. My arm was hanging out of the crib, and she accidentally broke my arm as she was walking by. So I ended up getting better after some people came to pray for me, and I came to San Francisco, and shortly in San Francisco I broke the same arm again. The doctors said that they were going to amputate my arm if I broke it one more time. They're not sure if they can fix it, and they didn't do it because my mother ended up praying, and God restored me on that problem there. So later on, my parents became Christians. They came from Nicaragua as Catholics, and they converted over to the Pentecostal Assemblies of God Church. And my dad was a leader in the church. So I grew up in the ministry since I was 3 years old. But the problem was that my dad was a leader in the church, and he was extremely abusive. What he would do was sometimes after church, when we would come home, he would strip me naked, and he would whip out electric coffee cords, and he would whip me until blood was coming out of my back. And this continued to happen for several years, me and one of my other brothers, and completely naked and with electric coffee cords hitting us full blast with all his might. And then he would shave our heads, and he would send us to school that way. So I had to sit in class for a 7-hour day class, wounded as I was, and continue to try to learn something. So I ended up running away from home when I was 9 years old, went to the streets in San Francisco, and I was returned home after they picked me up, and then I ran away from home again because the abuse continued to happen. And some of the people in the church were aware of what was going on, but not to the extent that it was. So this brought a lot of confusion in my mind, and finally I was 13 years old, and my dad was ready to do this to me again. My mother had left she brought us to the United States when I was 2 years old. She left shortly after, and I never saw her again. So my dad remarried. We were being raised by a stepmother and an abusive father, and my dad just was extremely violent. He would put us in the backyard to fight with strangers. He would invite some of the boys from church over to the house after church. When they would come over to our house, he would put boxing gloves on them and have them fight his boys, his sons. So he was raising us up in a world of violence. And so when I was 13, he was ready to whip me again, shave my head, and he had me choose the weapon that he was going to beat me with. So this time, I just ran straight out of the door to the police station that was directly across the street from my house. The police said that they couldn't do anything to help me, that I had to go to the juvenile authorities. It was a Friday evening around 4 o'clock. When I got to the juvenile hall, they were closing, so that meant I had to go into the streets. So one of my brothers was incarcerated in the youth authority. My other brother was in a coma from a car accident. And I was all alone, just looking for their friends so I could have somewhere to sleep for the evening. I ended up being on the streets for 6 months before they caught me again and put me in foster home placement, group homes, and then eventually into a juvenile detention camp, Log Cabin Ranch. And I was there for about 6 months. Getting out of there, I got into foster care again. And all this time, I was running in and out of the streets from church and into the streets trying to get my life back in order, but it seemed just impossible. I was trying to find redemption somehow, some way. So I became a youth counselor, thinking that I can help some young people come out of the situations that I was in. But what happened was that when I got into the social service realm, I started to see that a lot of the social workers were not clean themselves. They were using drugs, recreational drugs, self-medicating. So again, I started to drink, I started to use drugs, and I started to live a double life again. So I knew that this couldn't continue, but my life continued to go this way for about 40 years, in and out of the church, trying to find my own redemption, and I couldn't put a stop to it. And I would go clean for a while. I went to a ministry, was clean for 5 years, graduated from the school of ministry, on my way to becoming a minister, and I fell as soon as I graduated from the school of ministry. And I continued to do that for 40 years. Finally, what had to put a stop on it was when I finally got sick and was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver. First, they told me that I had Hep C. And I said, I don't have Hep C. The doctor says, well, we ran a blood test, you have Hep C. I said, what does that mean? Well, we ran more tests and you have cirrhosis. Okay, what does that mean? It's stage 4. What does that mean? There is no stage 5. You're going to die. At that point, I didn't know what to do, but to throw in the towel. I said, it's too late. I'm gonna die anyway, so I might as well just give up. And then I began to hear from the corner of my mind that the devil was laughing at me. He says, I finally got you. You're gonna die, and you're gonna stand before God, and you did not do what you were called to do. And that shook me to the core, because I wasn't afraid to die. I've been shot, I've been stabbed, I've been in the hospital, I've been in jail. But none of those things mattered at the time, because the thing that shook me to the core was that I didn't do what I was created to do. And I didn't want to stand before the Lord and have to answer for that. So I began to think, and I says, wait a minute. There's been prophecy in my life that I was going to be an evangelist one day. And it didn't make any sense. I says, how can I be dying when the promises of God have not been in full effect into my life? I said, the devil's a liar. The devil's lying to me. I am not going to die. I don't care what the doctors say. I don't care what my medical reports say. Not going to die. So I hung on to that little seed of faith that was planted into me. When I was 17 years old, some woman grabbed me in church and says, boy, you're going to be an evangelist. And I began to remember that day. I says, wait a minute. There's been a seed planted in me. The seed that no one can see, but it's the size of a mustard seed. I'm going to hang on to that little seed, and I'm going to fight back with everything I got. And I learned to get a hold of the Lord, and I fought for 7 years before I actually got my liver transplant. And when I would take one step forward, something else would hit me. This says, now you got pulmonary hypertension, you got cirrhosis, you got pulmonary hypertension, you got Hep C. But now you got cancer of the liver. But I knew that I was not failing. I knew that I was winning. Even though everything looked like it was going against me, I knew that I was winning. And because I knew that God was going to fulfill his promise in my life. And as they were going to insert a catheter in my heart because of pulmonary hypertension to help me breathe so they can prepare me for a liver transplant, I had to take a test. 3 times I failed this test. I didn't want this catheter in my heart because they were going to have a machine hanging out from my heart to my stomach. And I said, Lord, don't let this happen. That's going to affect ministry if I had this machine hanging out of my heart. As they were wheeling me in, and I was full of IVs, I began to pray. I says, Lord, don't let this happen. And they began to turn on the machines, and they said, we don't know what's taken place, but your numbers look practically perfect. We are not going to insert the catheter into your heart. And I says, I know you guys think I'm crazy, but I'm telling you, this is Jesus. I weigh 285 pounds. They told me, we can't give you a liver transplant. You are too big. And I took that to prayer as well. I said, Lord, I need to lose this weight. Supernaturally, I lost 102 pounds within 6 months. Ready for transplant now. My numbers are perfect. I lost the weight. And the only other thing was the cancer. So I had to beat the cancer now. So there was a minister, Michael Pitts, at a Jubilee Church in San Jose that I went to go visit because I knew that Michael Pitts was going to be anointing people with oil that he had from Africa for 200 years old was the oil. He anointed me with the oil, and the following week I went to another church and they did an altar call for healing. And my daughter asked me to go up there, and I says, no. She says, why? I said, I've been healed. That Monday I went in for the sonogram and the cancer was completely gone. Now I'm ready for transplant. And as I was getting ready for transplant, the doctor said that it's going to take 2 months before they can actually transplant me or start to talk about it. I got sick that very same day, turned completely yellow, and was taken to the emergency and said, you are not leaving here till transplant. And my daughter came to the hospital. It was a Thursday evening. And I told my daughter, by Monday, this will be handled. She says, but Dad, they have to find you a liver. I said, no. I said, by Monday, this will be handled. Because by then, I already knew what my God was going to do. I already had the faith that I needed. I already had grabbed onto the horns of the altar. I knew that my God was not going to fail me. And they kept me there for the few days, and that Saturday morning they came in and announced that they found the liver. Somebody with the same age as me, the same height, same everything. And somebody had to lose their life in order for me to live, and that was the sad part. And as my family came to the hospital to pray for me and read scriptures before they prepared me for transplant, the Holy Spirit fell on me so heavy that I began to pray in tongues and I couldn't stop. But what was taking place, there was being a shift in the atmosphere. The atmosphere was shifting because there was a preparation ready to take place. I was being translated to third dimension of faith. And they took me through the quarters that they take you in for surgery, and it's like the valley of the shadow of death because everything is stainless steel in there. It looks like the morgue. And you know that people go in that same way that I'm going in and they don't come back out. So the surgeons told my family, say bye to him before we take him into the surgery. I raised my hands and asked the doctors, are my hands shaking? The doctor said no. I said, because I'm not afraid. I know what my God's going to do. And as soon as I said that, there was a shift in the atmosphere. I was in a dense cloud, and it was completely smoky and cloudy. And everybody began to move in slow motion. And I was not under any medication yet. And I knew what was taking place. There was a legion of angels coming into my room surrounding me. As I saw this bright light, and I knew that Jesus was there, and that they were there to help the doctors with my surgery. The doctor said that I would have a complicated surgery because of prior surgeries that I've had to my abdomen. And when I was a kid, knife wounds and being shot and things like that. And I had no complications. I didn't even need a breathing tube. After the 8-hour surgery, I was walking the next day. My room number was 916, and I looked at that room, 916. The pastor said, let's look it up. It's in Romans 916. Not because you will it, not because you desire, because God's grace is on your life. And from that point on, everything began to happen to me, happen in the supernatural. I left that hospital, not with a story, but with a message. I came home, and as I came home, the only person in my home was the caretaker. She took me to my room, which was spotless because you have to have it sanitized before you can come home. And as I was preparing to go to bed, I seen some stuff all over my bed. I couldn't tell what it was. It looked grainy. As I walked over to my bed and I picked up the comforter to shake it, and it was a pile of gold dust that just turned up in the air. And as it was coming down, sprinkling all over my bed, it was evaporating in the air at the same time. And I had heard of things like that, but I have never experienced anything like that. And I knew the glory of God was in the presence of my home. And ever since then, I have a ministry now called Battle Tested Warriors Ministry. We're out of San Francisco. We're a mobile ministry, a church on wheels, taking the ministry into the streets, out of the four walls of the church. We go to the hospitals, we go to the homes, we go to Teen Challenge, we go anywhere that we're called to go minister. I also preach in different churches or help local pastors. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to share with you what God can do for me, He can do for you. Because He's the God of second chances. Don't ever believe the lie of the enemy. If the devil says this is it, the devil's a liar. God is in control. Give God all the glory. Give God all the praises, because He's the God of second chances.